Hare Krishna. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Vaisesika. Hare Krishna. This morning, we're anticipating Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu, and not just anticipating, but we're participating. And this morning, we have the opportunity to enter into the mood of Rath Yatra by following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya Mahāprabhu, who would be inspired by his associates headed by Swarup Damodar. And Swarup Damodar would inspire Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu by chanting various verses to enhance his mood, his devotional moods. In the case of Rath Yatra, it was in separation. We're very fortunate that Srila Prabhupada has given us entrance into this realm, which we do very carefully, with folded hands and bowed heads. We walk in the footsteps of our founder Acharya, who gave both sides. Śrī Jagannath Rath Yatra this morning, Savas was reading an excerpt where Srila Prabhupada was talking about Jagat Isha, or the controller of all moving and non-moving entities, and so forth. And in his purports, Srila Prabhupada holds forth with the esoteric meaning behind Rath Yatra. In summary, Prabhupada would say that many public appearances during Rath Yatra that this is a very feeling festival. And sometimes he would discuss the meaning of the residents of Vṛndāvana pulling Krishna from Dwarka, both to Vṛndāvana and into their hearts, which is something that he mentions elsewhere and frequently. So we'll start with the translation to the Śrī Jagannathashtakam, and then we have a few other verses which are bona fide and highly authorized as Prabhupada presents them within the Śrī Caitanya Charitamrita. And they'll be the verses that Mahaprabhu himself recited during the Rath Yatra in front of Lord Jagannātha. And perhaps by hearing those verses, we can also discuss some of their meanings, and thereby get an overview and build our sense of anticipation for the Rath Yatra. It's curious how one might see something in front of one's eyes and then miss it altogether because of not knowing what it is. That happens all the time. But when we prepare ourselves spiritually, then when we see Lord Jagannātha, after hearing about him, and especially through the eyes of his great devotees, and especially following the mood of Lord Chaitanya Mahāprabhu, then we can also experience what Prabhupada's talking about when he says that Rath Yatra is a feeling festival. What is that feeling? Everyone is after that. And Srila Prabhupada wanted us to have that feeling. Also, I'm deeply grateful to Savas Prabhu and Tidit for maintaining an environment in which anyone can come and feel spiritually surcharged, what to speak of carrying on the Rath Yatra for decades. It's no easy feat. Madhvacharya, when discussing the symptoms of a highly advanced person, said you can judge only by two symptoms. One is by the words they speak. Are they merciful? And the second is by their steadiness. So Savasa and Tidit have been the steadiest of the steady in the world, and thank you very much for your example. And now, if somebody will give me some Shastra in front of my face, then we can read some translations and so forth. Where's our high-tech team? It's going to give me something to look at. So let's read the translations together of the Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu. Is it on the board? Okay, please go ahead.
Sometimes a great happiness for Lord Jagannātha is all concert with his flute on the banks of Vaisesika. He is like a bumblebee tasting the beautiful lotus-like faces of the cowherd dance or Raj.
Thank you.
And great personalities such as Lakshmi,
I got to push it.
Brahmā,
It's all right. I thought it was automatic. It was still the technical.
May that Jagannath Swami be the object of my vision.
Okay, thank you.
In his left hand, Lord Jagannātha
I need it for the verses.
on his head he wears peacock feathers, and on his lips he wears
I'll take the CC.
From the corners of his eyes he bestows sidelong glances upon his loving devotees, and he always reveals himself through his pastimes and his divine abode, Vṛndāvana. May that Jagannath Swami be the object of my vision. On the shore of the great ocean, with the large palace on the brilliant golden Nilachalaka, Lord Jagannāth resides with his powerful brother Vṛndāvana and his sister Purāṇas, who sits between them. May that Jagannath Swami be the source of opportunity for devotional service of all souls to be the object of my vision. Lord Jagannāth is an ocean of mercy.
And it's as beautiful as a row of blackish rain clouds. He's the storehouse of bliss for Lakshmi and Saraswati, and his face is like a spotless, full-blown lotus.
Best of the demigods and sages worship him, and the Upanishads sing of his glories. May that Jagannath Swami be the object of my vision. When Lord Jagannath moves along the road of the Vṛndāvana cart, at every step Lord Kṛṣṇa and the Brahmins loudly chant prayers and sing songs for his pleasure. Hearing their hymns, Lord Jagannath becomes very big with his full sword. He is the ocean of mercy, which is all the worlds. May that Jagannath Swami always exalts Lakshmi, who was born for the ocean of nectar, to be the object of my vision. Lord Jagannāth resides in the full lotus adorned with Brahmā. He resides on Nilachala hill with his lotus feet placed on the heads of anatomy. Overwhelmed by the mellows of love, he joyfully embraces Srimati Radharani's body, which is like a cool pond. May that Jagannath Swami be the object of my vision. I do not pray for a kingdom, nor for a please well. I do not ask for a beautiful wife as desired by all men.
It should move on its own.
That's good.
Glory, Lord Shiva, always sings. May be the constant object
Of my vision. O Lord of the demigods, please quickly remove this useless material existence I am undergoing. O Lord of the Yadus, please destroy this vast shoreless ocean of sins. Alas, certain Jagannath Puri feet upon those who feel themselves fallen and have no shelter. And now, as promised, we're going to read a couple of translations to verses that are key to the understanding of Rath Yatra. This verse was composed by Srila Rupa Goswami, and he composed this verse after hearing Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu at Rath Yatra singing a secular verse that was known to be didactic for teaching students writing, but the specific piece was something what not to write. So it seemed a little out of place during the Rath Yatra. And Swarup Damodar could hear Chaitanya Mahaprabhu singing this song, and he was the only one there that understood it. But later, Srila Rupa Goswami revealed its meaning. So, obviously, Swarup Damodar wasn't the only one. In fact, the associates of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu, you'll find in the Anti Lila in the very beginning, remark, how did Rupa Goswami, or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu remarks, first to Rupa Goswami, after giving him a slap, after he found the verse stuck in the thatch of the roof of Haridas Thakur's Bhajan Kutir. And Mahaprabhu read the verse, and when he then met Rupa Goswami, he said, "What are you telling everybody? How did you know these things? These are my inner ecstasies and realizations, so now you're broadcasting them." And later, Mahaprabhu, in an assembly of his intimate associates, asked Swarup Damodar, how would he have known these things? And Swarup Damodar replies that you had empowered him to understand these things. So it's a very special verse. This verse is the verse that Rupa Goswami wrote, translating the meaning of the verse that Mahaprabhu was singing from a secular source. My dear friend, now I have met my very old and dear friend Krishna on this field of Kurukshetra. I am the same Radharani, and now we are meeting together. It is very pleasant, but still I would like to go to the bank of the Jamuna, beneath the trees of the forest there. I wish to hear the vibration of his sweet flute playing the fifth note within that forest of Vṛndāvana. And here we find the verse that Mahaprabhu sang at Rath Yatra repeatedly, much to the dismay of onlookers who thought, why is he singing this song? That very personality who stole away my heart during my youth is now again my master. These are the same moonlit nights of the month of Chaitra. The same fragrance of malati flowers is there, and the same sweet breezes are blowing from the Kadamba forest. In our intimate relationship, I am also the same lover. Yet still my mind is not happy here. I'm eager to go back to that place on the bank of the Reva, under the Vetasi tree. That is my desire. And this verse was a verse repeated by Swarup Damodar during the Rath Yatra procession by the tacit request of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who wanted his most intimate associate, Swarup Damodar, to inflame the feelings of separation within his heart during the Rath Yatra ceremony. Together we can read, now I've gained the Lord of my life, in the absence of whom I was being burned by Cupid and was withering away. And another verse which Kaviraj Goswami has included in the 13th chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which describes the meaning of Rath Yatra. This is the voice of Srimati Radharani. Speaking in the mood of Srimati Radharani, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, for most people the mind and heart are one, but because my mind is never separated from Vṛndāvana, I consider my mind and Vṛndāvana to be one. My mind is already Vṛndāvana, and since you like Vṛndāvana, will you please place your lotus feet there? I would deem that your full mercy. There's two more verses. These next two come from the 82nd chapter of the 10th canto, which you'll find is a parallel to the 13th chapter of the Madhya Lila, the Chaitanya Charitamrita. When Prabhupada commissioned the artists to show the parallel between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Lila and Krishna's Lila, they'd have a split screen, so to speak, and on top he'll have the Rasa Lila, and below he has Harinam Sankirtan, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates. So the two chapters especially bring forth this parallel. Chapter 82 is the story of Krishna going to Kurukshetra, place of pilgrimage and a place where the Yadav dynasty had performed sacrifices for millennia, and Parashuram had gone there to atone for his so-called sins of killing the Kshatriyas 21 times. And now Krishna goes there ostensibly to perform some ritual in relationship with the eclipse of the sun. But actually, the inner purpose he held was to meet again with the residents of Vṛndāvana, whom he had left over 100 years ago and who were pining for him. And this is one of the verses that he spoke to the gopis while he was there in Kurukshetra. So it's one of the verses that Prabhupada frequently quoted from. Lord Sri Krishna said, "Rendering devotional service unto me qualifies any living being for eternal life. But by your good fortune, you have developed a special loving attitude toward me, by which you have attained me." And finally, the gopis. "Dear Lord, whose navel is just like a lotus flower, your lotus feet are the only shelter for those who have fallen into the deep well of material existence. Your feet are worshipped and meditated upon by great mystic yogis and highly learned philosophers. We wish that these lotus feet may also be awakened within our hearts, although we're only ordinary persons engaged in household affairs." And now we'll sing the Jagannath Ashtakam in unison, and then the other verses together, and then we can have a discussion about Rath Yatra. I first offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who brought the Jagannath Rath Yatra to America and also anointed the first saint in our movement, Srimad Jayananda Prabhu, who I had the great fortune of meeting the first day I walked in the door in San Francisco, as I happened to walk in the day after Rath Yatra, and they were putting away the wheels and asked me if I'd like to help. Srila Prabhupada had noted that Jayananda Prabhu was a selfless servant who was willing to do whatever necessary to not just promote Rath Yatra, but any other program that Prabhupada was doing. And when he left this world, Jayananda Prabhu had done the impossible, which was to be fully focused on Prabhupada and the holy names just at the very moment that he was leaving his body, and Prabhupada pronounced that he had gone back home, back to Godhead. What's more, he said that his picture should appear on every Rath Yatra cart. And therefore, we'll see today that Jayananda Prabhu's picture is on the carts. Prabhupada also told us to celebrate every year, just as we do the Acharyas, his disappearance from this world. The first and only. And Prabhupada left soon after that. Proof positive that Krishna consciousness works for those who are meek and humble and simply follow the simple path strictly. And in the matter of our Rath Yatra, which Prabhupada has given to us as, well, I will say an ocean, but better example is given in the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam of an estuary. An estuary is a place where a freshwater river meets the ocean. And it's known as nature's most complete nursery, because within the combination of the seawater and the fresh water, and at times when the tide of the ocean is high, the ocean water overruns the river. In fact, it backs it up, and there's a mixture between the fresh and the salt water. This is one of the most productive ecosystems on the earthly planet. The water becomes brackish, which means slightly salty. And there are many life forms that thrive there. And in the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find Sanatana Swami says, Yat pada pankacha palasa vilasya bhakta karmashrayam gratitam udgratayanti santa tadvanna rikta matayo yatayopi rudha shrotoganas tamaranam vajavasudevam. And that is that many yogis who do not have the proclivity to surrender to Krishna, and although they're very expert, muni pungavanam, as Brahmā Samhita says, highly accomplished yogis, they can't overcome the knots in the heart. In fact, it's said that although they may achieve some form of liberation because of their hard endeavors, at some point they're washed away by the powerful tides of material nature. And in this verse, Sanat Goswami says, those who are devotees, however, that pada pankacha palasa vilasa bhakta. The vilas means a very specific kind of pleasure that's ever increasing, a beauty that's always more astounding than it was before. And he refers to the lotus petals of Krishna's feet and says that the devotees relish the pastimes, the names, the forms of the Lord. They're absorbed in these. And because of that, yat pada pankacha palasa vilasya bhakta karmashrayam gratitam udgratayanti santa. The knot that holds us here in the material world is cut. He said, but the others, that means all others who are not in this conception of the personality of Godhead, who is the most attractive and who has pastimes, and they are rikta matayo, which means their minds are empty. They have no resort, nothing to think of. And they always come back to the variety of the material world. And in this regard, we find in the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Janmadhyasya yataha. And Srila Prabhupada, following the commentaries of previous acharyas, says this Bhagavatam is about adiras, or he calls the original sex psychology. And this is important because this attraction to the material world is based on sex. And the spiritual world is also based on sex. Last time I'll say sex besides that. But it's in Prabhupada's purport, so I thought it would be effective. And he says that experience in the spiritual world is without inebriety. If you look up the word inebriety, which I obviously have, otherwise I wouldn't have brought it up, it has to do with drinking and getting drunk. It comes from Latin. Apparently, they drank also. All living entities do drink something. Ironically, however, we find in the Srimad Bhagavatam 3rd verse, Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Aho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavakaha, is advocating drinking. Pibata. It means there is a topic that you can drink, just as Parikshit Maharaj mentioned when he was hearing from Shukadeva Goswami. He was fasting. Nai shati dushaha shudman takdodam apipadate pibantam tvam mukhan boja chutam harikatam ritam. Pibantam, drinking. What was the result of his drinking? What was he drinking? Chutam harikatam ritam. Whatever nectar was falling from the mouth of Shukadeva Goswami. He said, I'm drinking that. And therefore, although it's very difficult to fast, anyone? And although it's very difficult to not sleep, he said, I'm not tired, nor am I hungry. What to speak of? I am not even drinking. But I am drinking something. Pibantam tvam mukham bojam. Chuta means falling. So whatever nectar is falling through your mouth, I'm drinking that, and therefore I'm not tired. And in the Bhagavatam it says, you drink this. It's semi-solid, it's already digested. by the previous acharyas, by Shuka. And it's so nectarian that when you take it, you become laya, which means that you may faint. But what do you do when you wake up? You say, go on drinking. So on one side we have the idea that there's what is called tapakari, the so-called pleasure in this material world of interacting with the senses and their objects. It brings hlada tapakari, which means that pleasure brings you misery. Whereas the happiness of hearing specifically about Krishna, the specifics of his pastimes, the specifics of his forms, the specific of his activities, that kind of drinking, it makes you qualified for more drinking, and there's no side effect, except that you become happier and happier. This is relevant to our Ratha Yatra because we're giving all of us. Prabhupada has given all of us. Suvas Prabhu is giving all of us the opportunity to participate in a pastime that's eternal and is very specific. And this is mentioned at the very end of the 90th chapter of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam by Shukadeva Goswami, a verse that consoles our hearts. Would you like to hear a verse that consoles our hearts?
Yes.
Only half answered yes, so the other half, just cover your ears really hard. Jayati jana nivaso devaki janmavadu yaruvara parishat swara dorphitasyanadharman stirachara vijinana susmita shumikena rajapura vanitanam varyam kamadevam. He speaks about Krishna at the end of that chapter as a consolation to the devotees who are reading it now and who then say, why did I miss being there when Krishna was performing his pastimes thousands of years ago? How unfortunate am I? But he writes it specifically, Jayati. It is all glorious and it conquers everyone in the present tense. Says Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur about this verse. He specifically did that to remind all of us that Krishna's pastimes are eternal. When you participate in the festival for Krishna, or when you go to the holy places where Krishna performed his pastimes, or you chant his names, present tense, still fully there, no difference whatsoever. And so the Ratha Yatra is what many acharyas call the pinnacle of Krishna's pastimes, in that in our sampradaya we emphasize, or rather I should say Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu by his example and his following acharyas emphasize the mood of separation. We know when we read the Goswami Ashtakam, Hey Radhe Rajidevaki Chalalite, Hey Nanda Suno Kutaha. He said, Kutaha, where are you? As Prabhupada comments on that verse, he says, they're not seeing Krishna directly there, or they are seeing Krishna directly, but not as if I'm with Krishna now. They're always saying, where is he? Is he on Govardhan Hill? Is he by the Jamuna? They're searching for him in separation. And the pastime of Ratha Yatra is the pinnacle of all pastimes about separation. Now, the historical context, Krishna had left Vṛndāvana. The Kura came on the behest of Kamsa, and when he was leaving, the gopis entwined themselves on the wheels of Akura's chariot and also stood in front of the chariot hoping that he wouldn't leave. Krishna said, I will be back. And after he left, they stood, did the gopis, like painted pictures on the road, watching his chariot go off into the distance. The only thing that kept them alive for over 100 years before they met Krishna at Kurukshetra was his words, I will return. And they thought a few days. So 3 days, from Monday, and then 3 days from Wednesday, and then 3 days from that, and 3 days, and 3 days went on 100 years. And then Krishna, on the pretext of going to the Rath Yatra, excuse me, how can you help it? And the pretext of going to Kurukshetra to perform some ritualistic ceremony, went with his minions, millions of soldiers and followers, and then the sages came, demigods came, everyone came because Krishna was going. And the word got out, and residents of Vṛndāvana also came, hopefully to meet Krishna. So when they come to Kurukshetra, as per the 82nd chapter of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, they have a meeting there. And during that meeting, there's this sense of the estuary. And that is that Dwarka Krishna is kingly. He's the king of Dwarka. And then there's the residents of Vṛndāvana, who are simple. They're cowherds. And they come there, and these two worlds collide. In fact, in the Skanda Purāṇa, there's a description of the form of Lord Jagannāth, which somebody might say, that's a form of Krishna? They say, yeah, it looks a little smushed. Literally, this is not offensive because we know the descriptions are there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Lord Chaitanya himself, as he's performing his pastimes and hearing these topics from Swarup Damodar and Ramananda Roy. They're in the Gambhira. Sometimes, even though the doors are locked, he gets out anyway. There's no way to get out. He gets out. And the devotees have to search for him. Sometimes they find him in the oddest places, in the ocean, in the cow shed, with cows licking his body, his transcendental body. And the author describes his various distorted forms. Sometimes his limbs are elongated, and sometimes they're compressed within his body. And the Skanda Purāṇa says that, recounts how when Krishna was in Dwarka, the residents of Dwarka had a conversation, this is also in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, talking about how Krishna, he seems preoccupied. He's with us, but he's thinking of somebody else. Oh, who's he thinking of? Well, I can tell you, that one says that at night, when he's sleeping, he's calling out the names of cows, and not just cows. He's talking about girls. And as described there also, sometimes, especially one day, Krishna wakes up having drenched his pillow with tears, because he's thinking about the residents of Vṛndāvana. And all the residents of Dwarka wanting to know more about this relationship Krishna has before he met them. Yeah, that's kind of natural. Like, what was he doing there? Who are these people? Who are these gopis? Who are the names of these people? Who are the faces behind the names of these devotees he's mentioning? They asked Rohini, because Rohini, the mother of Balaram, is there in Dwarka, and she was also there in the Vṛndāvana pastimes to find out the nature of Krishna's relationships. So of course they get a haul, because when they find out that Rohini's going to speak, everyone wants to come. And while she's speaking, they ask Subhadra to guard the door, because Rohini's worried that if Krishna, Balaram come and hear this discussion, they're already so overwrought with this sense of separation from Vṛndāvana. They're not sure what it might do. One of the anxieties of the residents of Dwarka always is to keep Krishna here. Don't let him go back. One way or another, keep him here. And so as Rohini's talking about the pastimes of Krishna and Balaram in Vṛndāvana, so happens that Krishna and Balaram come. Subhadra is guarding the door, but she becomes preoccupied, and then the three are standing together as we see them here, and in ecstasy of hearing about the residents of Vṛndāvana and the separation they're feeling, the form becomes Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. This is the title of Jagannath Puri itself, is Vipralambha Kṣetra, the place where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes to dive deeply within this mood of separation that the residents of Vṛndāvana felt. And so, the benefit of this festival, of course there are many verses, we've read some in the Nectar of Devotion, there in various Purāṇas, that if somebody sees Lord Jagannātha on his cart or hears about his pastimes, such a person gets eternal benefit. He even says they'll go back to Godhead. And for those who have dedicated themselves to Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu and his movement, Brahmā gives us a verse in his prayers to Lord Kṛṣṇa that is uplifting and directive. He says, jñāne prayāsam udapāsya namanta eva, jīvanti san-mukharitāṁ bhavadīya-vārtām, sthāne sthitāḥ śruti-gatāṁ tanu-vāṅ-manobhir, prayāso jito pastimes trilokyam. And a key part of this verse is where Brahmā says, jīvanti san-mukharitāṁ, bhavadīya-vārtām. And the word jīvanti means to live. But to live for what? To live just to hear about Krishna. As is mentioned in this verse, don't try to speculate. Don't try to follow your own path. This morning we were on a japa walk. We went 3 times around the entire block. And at the end we had a sharing session to see how it was for everyone and how the japa went. And Bhagavat Prana, who's sitting right here, said that he had gotten a little behind the parikram. And so he said he thought he'd cut across somehow and try to catch up. And he found himself in the middle of a sprinkler that went off, dogs barking. I'm embellishing a little. Zigzag, lost, couldn't find it. And when he finally caught up at the end, he said, better just to follow the straight path given. Don't try to take a shortcut. And so jīvanti san-mukharitāṁ means that if you simply take the authorized version given through parampara and hear about Krishna, that's your life. You take a little prasad, right? Yes. Say yes. Yes. And then you take a little rest. Yes. Except for Svas, I don't think he slept. Then, or many of you here in New Dwarka. And then you wake up to hear. That becomes your entire focus in life. He said, then every desire will be fulfilled. Nothing will be lacking in your life. And so this Jagannath festival, as we take Lord Jagannāth out into the world, it's also estuary-like. What a clash of culture between Venice Beach and Jagannath. Both are highly sensual. One of the verses that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sang before the cart of Lord Jagannath was Namo Brahmanya-devaya Go Brahmana-hitaya cha Jagatitaya Krishna Govindaya Namo Namo. Govindaya, to Lord Govinda. Who is Lord Govinda? He's the Lord of the senses. He's the one who is the source of all people's senses. And when we satisfy the senses of Lord Govinda, then all of our senses are satisfied. And that's why devotees are so sensual, because they've discovered the secret of life. And that is, when you satisfy Govinda's senses, then you enjoy unlimitedly. In fact, when I was chanting japa this morning, His Grace Rameshwar Prabhu came up with the book, The Nectar of Devotion. He said, I want to show you my favorite paragraph in all of Prabhupada's books. And there it said that Rupa Goswami has analyzed pleasure and has given us the gradations of pleasure available Would anybody like to know?
Yes.
Of course, everyone wants to know because living entities just want to have fun. Cyndi Lauper said that. And he showed me the section where Prabhupada translates a verse from Rupa Goswami where he says, the pleasure of Brahmanda, Brahman pleasure, not identifying with the body, but knowing that you're eternal spiritual being, part parcel of Krishna. He said it's millions of times, wait, that's the other part. He says millions of times better than material pleasure. He said, but the pleasure of the vilas, of hearing of the pastimes, the specific beauty, the specific forms of Krishna, as in Yat pada pankacha palasha vilasha bhakta, said that is trillions of times more pleasurable than the pleasure of Brahmananda. And we need that, right? Say yes.
Yes.
We need that because without at least a molecule of that, how can we ever turn away from the material world? It seems impossible. But what we're doing here is we're taking the ocean out into the river and overcoming the river. When people who are trying to enjoy it, we notice them along the route. They have maybe a convertible car and they're driving along what we call in America copping a lean. Leaning out that's died and it's like, got a full tank of gas and I'm cool. But when they see Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra and their convertibles going by, they go, wait a minute, who was that? And when they see them on their chariots, as the people are having a cerveza in the early morning, think, I can do this, I can handle it. I can be intoxicated and I'll recover somehow. And then they see the devotees chanting, dancing, coming by. Suddenly they're overcome with a sense of maybe I'm in trouble here and I should find some help. It's the ocean overwhelming the river, the estuary. And in that environment, both esoterically, when Dwarka comes to Vṛndāvana, it's revealed within that ecosystem, spiritual ecosystem, the highest aspiration of all devotees. Because there it's Radharani meeting Krishna at Kurukshetra and then saying, as she is quoted by Rupa Goswami, that we're meeting here. It's very pleasant, but I want to go back to the bank of the river, a bank of the Jamuna, beneath the trees of the forest there. I want to hear the vibration of your sweet flute playing the fifth note. And when Krishna then admits, I cry day and night, full separation, and they have that meeting there at Kurukshetra, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has said that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his father, had once commented that of all the places one could perform bhajan, Kurukshetra is the best, and everyone was surprised. What do you mean Kurukshetra? Bhagavad Gita, what? But he's talking about this pastime of Rath Yatra, where Srimati Radharani comes to Kurukshetra to meet Krishna, and they're meeting, but she said, no, we didn't quite make it. One great devotee had once said about in a football game, you're down to the last 10 seconds, your team has the ball, the championship's on the line. Am I getting your blood going? And in the last 2 seconds, there's a play, and there's a scrimmage, and then they look, and you're 2 inches too short, and everyone looks at the clock, and it's 0, and it's over. What? The whole city. When I lived in St. Louis, Missouri, you could tell who was winning the baseball game by the mood of the people in the stores. And this is in Kurukshetra. They're almost there, and then, no, this doesn't, I can't be with you like this. And then Krishna relents and says, no, I'll come back to Vṛndāvana. And that's the pulling of the carts. And Prabhupada says, pulling Krishna back into our hearts. So we are fortunate to be involved and to have the information of what this pastime means. And if we enter deeply within it and also give it to other people, we'll notice that inextricably they're drawn to the vibration, and for us it reconfirms its power. And now I'll just take a couple of reflections or comments or questions. Rameshwar Prabhu, and if we have a microphone you can pass it back.
I want to share something very, what's so unique about this Rath Yatra here in New York.
He wants to share something that's very unique about this Rath Yatra here in New Dwarka.
When Srila Prabhupada compared Jayananda to the great saints in the tradition of our whole Vaishnava Sampradaya, just prior to him saying that, on the occasion of his disappearance, we had written to Prabhupada something else about Jayananda which he acknowledged. In ISKCON, we generally do not say, oh, this devotee saw Krishna. Actually, Krishna appeared to this devotee. We generally don't say that about ISKCON devotees. Except Krishna appeared personally in his Jagannath form to Jayananda. And Jayananda told me this because he was in Mexico getting a private treatment for the worst, most painful cancer of all the cancers. And that's when the Lord appeared to him and spoke to him, I want one more service from you. I want you to give up all these treatments and go to Los Angeles and put on a Rath Yatra festival for me in Los Angeles. The Lord Jagannātha requested that personally. What of the Rath Yatra festival in any city can you say that about? So Jayananda, with his servant, jumped in a car and drove straight to Los Angeles, explained his vision to Mukunda, and then they both explained it to me. And the result is this amazing New Dwarka Rath Yatra festival that the Lord personally requested.
Now,
and just one last thing, in manifesting this festival, part of Jayananda's vision, prior, all the Rath Yatras that had been held before, mainly San Francisco and just before New York, consisted of the procession with the giant chariots, a wonderful stage for kirtan and speaking, book table for Prabhupada books, and prasadam table for giving out the prasadam, free prasadam. That was typically the setup for every Rath Yatra until Jayananda came to New Dwarka. And at this New Dwarka festival, the very beginning, first festival, there were dozens and dozens of booths presenting Krishna conscious culture. There were deity outfits, there were art exhibits, there were panels of philosophy. I mean, all of these things that now make up the Festival of India, this was part of the original vision that Jayananda had, and it was done for the first time in ISKCON here in New Dwarka, which also makes the festival very special, leading up to next year, the 50th anniversary.
thank you, Rameshwar Prabhu, and thank you everyone for coming to the class this morning. Although many are working extra hours and many of you drove all night and got up early, and there's lots of service to do today. So I'll end with a prayer and a free gift for everybody. You want a free gift or no? All right. So, dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Jayananda Prabhu, if you so desire, please let us enter into a mode of selfless service, following in the footsteps of the great acharyas to help expand the Sankirtan movement in every way possible by speaking from Srila Prabhupada's books, distributing them, following the simple program strictly that he gave us, and introducing it to people along Santa Monica roadsides and through Venice Beach, and at Venice Beach, and every day thereafter. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please say Hare Krishna. Now I just happen to have a free gift, and just after that, they're going to need this room for making garlands, I think, still. So we have to vacate, but that won't be hard because there's prasadam. And there's a few of us, it's our tradition to chant a couple of verses here. And if anybody wants to join, have we made it easy, or we haven't done that yet? We've made it easy. We have a thing called Verse Circle, and it's a website. You can just pop on. We have a QR code. And if you want to chant a couple of verses with us, we'll just take another 15 minutes just now after I give out these gifts. Thank you very much, Suvas Prabhu and all the devotees. Vanchakalpadrishta kripasindebevacha patitanam bhavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha anantakoti vaishnavini ki jai go premanande haribol.